Have you ever felt like being smart is more of a burden than a blessing? Like the more you know, the harder it gets to fit in, and the more distant people become. It's almost as if the more you understand, the more others misunderstand you. It's a strange and painful paradox that many intelligent people face daily. It's not just about being awkward or socially unpolished. It's about something deeper, something that most people don't even realize. Intelligence has a dark side. And no one understood this better than Arthur Schopenhauer, a philosopher who lived nearly 200 years ago. Schopenhauer wasn't just a thinker. He was someone who truly lived through the isolation that comes with intelligence. He saw firsthand how intelligence often sets people apart, pushing them into the shadows of society. But here's the twist. Schopenhauer didn't just accept this as fate. He wanted to understand why it was happening, and more importantly, what it meant for those who were affected. He wasn't looking for sympathy. He was searching for truth. In his observations, Schopenhauer realized something disturbing. People don't just reject the intelligent. They fear them. Not because of anything the smart person has done, but simply because their presence forces others to confront their own limitations. Think about that for a second. Being smart doesn't necessarily mean you're bragging or acting superior. In fact, the most intelligent often don't even boast about their abilities. Yet, the mere fact that they know more, understand more, or think more deeply creates discomfort in others. This discomfort isn't something people consciously recognize. It's not like they're aware of how their brain reacts when faced with someone smarter. But, just like a mirror can make someone feel self-conscious about their appearance, intelligence can make people feel self-conscious about their intellect. It's as if your intelligence holds up a mirror, and in that reflection, others see their own lack of knowledge, their own unexamined thoughts, and their own shortcomings. For most people, that mirror isn't just uncomfortable, it's painful. Imagine walking into a room, and without saying a word, everyone in the room starts feeling worse about themselves. That's the experience many intelligent people face daily. And it's not that they're doing anything wrong. They're just too smart, and that alone can trigger a kind of social rejection. Schopenhauer understood that this wasn't just some odd quirk of human nature. It was a fundamental part of how society works. And the more you understand this dynamic, the easier it is to navigate a world that doesn't always appreciate the power of knowledge. Because, as Schopenhauer warned, intelligence doesn't just set you apart, it can leave you isolated, misunderstood, and even resented. But why? Why does society react this way to intelligence, especially when other forms of superiority, like wealth or beauty, seem to be celebrated instead? Let's take a deeper look at this unsettling question, and uncover the dark truth about intelligence that Schopenhauer discovered nearly 2 centuries ago. Schopenhauer's warning wasn't just a personal observation, it was rooted in something far more profound, the nature of human insecurity. At the core of his philosophy was the idea that humans are driven not by reason, but by deep-seated desires and instincts, which often lead them to avoid anything that threatens their comfort zone. Intelligence, especially a high level of it, is exactly that threat. It challenges the very foundation of their understanding of the world, making them question their own beliefs, their own assumptions, and their own sense of security. Think about it. How many times have you met someone who, at first glance, appeared confident, maybe even smug, but as the conversation progressed, you noticed something strange? They seemed more focused on keeping the conversation in safe, familiar territories, often avoiding anything that might challenge their worldview. This is because, deep down, everyone has an innate fear of being exposed as ignorant or uninformed. For many, the more intelligent you are, the more you expose their weaknesses, and this makes them uncomfortable, sometimes to the point of resentment. Schopenhauer saw this fear as a central feature of human nature. He believed that this discomfort with intelligence wasn't just a passing feeling. It was a deeply embedded response. People aren't simply offended by smart people, they feel threatened by them. And that fear manifests in subtle, yet powerful ways. It's in the way someone may dismiss a complex idea with a sarcastic remark. It's in the way a conversation turns awkward when someone says something too intellectual, too challenging, or too new. It's not that they don't understand, it's that they don't want to understand. Because understanding might mean acknowledging that they've been living with half-truths, with misconceptions, or with a dangerously narrow view of the world. The truth is, the more intelligent you are, the more likely it is that you will encounter people who feel this subconscious hostility toward you. It's not personal, even though it can feel that way. In fact, Schopenhauer believed that this was an unavoidable part of the human condition. The tendency to push away anything that makes us feel small, inadequate, or irrelevant. And here's where Schopenhauer's insight becomes even darker. He argued that this rejection wasn't just a natural reaction to discomfort, it was a fundamental aspect of the way society maintains its cohesion. People need to feel normal to function within their social structures. To be normal means to share common assumptions, to be on the same intellectual level. When someone comes along who challenges those assumptions, they disrupt that fragile sense of harmony. And so, to protect the social order, society has to suppress those who are different, who are smarter, who question the status quo. Schopenhauer's philosophy suggests that intelligence isn't just a tool, it's a potential source of social upheaval. If you're too smart, you're dangerous. Not in the way society usually thinks of dangerous people, those who incite violence or disrupt the law, but dangerous because you threaten to unravel the very fabric of collective ignorance that keeps people comfortable. You challenge their self-image, their worldview, and their place in society. And in response, they push back. That's why, Schopenhauer claimed, intelligent people often find themselves alienated. It's not that they're incapable of fitting in, it's that their intelligence, the very thing that should be celebrated, becomes a weapon of social exclusion. And this reality is often painful to accept. But Schopenhauer's warning was clear. The higher your intellect, the more isolated you will become, unless you learn how to navigate these subtle social currents. So, while society may praise intelligence in theory, in practice, it punishes those who possess it in excess. And this punishment isn't always overt. Sometimes, it's just the cold shoulder, the awkward silences, or the subtle exclusion. But it's enough to make any intelligent person feel like an outsider. And for Schopenhauer, this wasn't just an unfortunate side effect of being smart, it was an inescapable consequence of human nature itself. But why does society react this way? Why does intelligence, something that could lead to progress, innovation, and enlightenment, spark such fear and hostility? Schopenhauer's philosophy gives us a clue. It's because intelligence forces people to confront the uncomfortable truth of their own limitations. People would rather live in ignorance than face the often unsettling realities that intelligent minds can uncover. It's not hard to see why this is the case. In a world that prizes comfort and security, being confronted by the sharp edges of truth can be terrifying. We see this all the time in our modern lives. Think about how many times people will dismiss scientific findings, deny historical facts, or reject new ideas simply because they are too challenging. They may not have the intellectual capacity to engage with complex ideas, but rather than admit their lack of understanding, they would rather ignore or ridicule those who can offer deeper insights. This is where Schopenhauer's warning really begins to hit home. When you challenge the dominant worldview, you threaten the entire social fabric. For Schopenhauer, this was not just a matter of personal discomfort, it was a necessary survival mechanism. The average person, he argued, is not equipped to process the complexities of the world. They rely on simple truths, easy narratives, and comforting myths. These mental shortcuts help them make sense of the world, but they also prevent them from seeing the full picture. And when someone comes along with the ability to see that full picture, they shake up the equilibrium. This can make people uncomfortable, even angry, because it forces them to confront their own ignorance, their own lack of understanding. The irony, of course, is that it is often the smartest, most capable people who are most attuned to the nuances of the world. They're the ones who can see past the superficial layers of society and recognize the flaws, the contradictions, and the deeper truths hidden beneath. But because of this heightened awareness, they also become targets. Their intelligence exposes the cracks in the very system that others have constructed to shield themselves from uncertainty. This is why, Schopenhauer argued, intelligent individuals are often isolated. They're too aware, too perceptive, and that awareness creates an invisible barrier between them and others. But there's a deeper, more insidious layer to this dynamic. Schopenhauer believed that the desire to suppress intelligence was not merely a reaction to discomfort, it was a defense mechanism, a way of preserving the status quo. In a society where intelligence is feared, it becomes much easier to maintain power, control, and dominance. If everyone sticks to simple truths and unchallenged assumptions, it's easier to control the masses. The more intelligent people are, the harder it becomes to control them. This, in Schopenhauer's view, was a form of social manipulation. The danger of this dynamic is that it doesn't just harm the intelligent individuals who are targeted, it harms society as a whole. When intelligence is suppressed, when complex ideas are ignored or ridiculed, society stagnates. It's the intelligent minds who push boundaries, who think outside the box, who drive innovation and progress. When those minds are silenced, society loses its capacity for growth, adaptation, and improvement. Schopenhauer saw this as a tragic inevitability, a cycle where the smartest individuals are forced into isolation or self-censorship, and the collective intelligence of society is gradually dulled as a result. This suppression of intelligence, Schopenhauer believed, wasn't just an unfortunate byproduct of human nature, it was a fatal flaw in the structure of society itself. And this flaw had far-reaching consequences. The more intelligent you are, the more you are forced to operate within a system that doesn't truly value or appreciate what you have to offer. And in turn, this creates a vicious cycle, where those who are capable of change are isolated, while those who prefer comfort and stability remain in control. It's a recipe for intellectual decay, one that Schopenhauer felt would ultimately stunt human progress. In this context, intelligence becomes not just a personal trait but a social burden. The very thing that should be celebrated is the very thing that isolates you. Schopenhauer's warning, then, was not just about the personal costs of intelligence. It was about the collective cost of ignoring, rejecting, or suppressing it. When society does this, it closes off its potential for growth, and in the end, everyone suffers. Schopenhauer's warning becomes even more poignant when we consider how the suppression of intelligence shapes our perceptions of success and achievement. In a society that values conformity over originality, the idea of intelligence becomes twisted. Rather than being seen as a force for progress and enlightenment, it's often misunderstood as a threat, a deviation from the norm. In many cultures, intelligence is still equated with arrogance, elitism, or even eccentricity. It's not uncommon to hear phrases like, "too smart for your own good," or "you're overthinking it," when someone presents an idea that challenges the status quo. This isn't just a casual dismissal. It's a societal mechanism to keep people in line. People who think differently, who question established norms, are often labeled as outsiders, troublemakers, or even dangerous. This makes intelligent individuals wary of expressing their full potential. Over time, many learn to hide their true intellect, presenting only what is socially acceptable, and this stifles creativity, innovation, and self-actualization. Think about the professional world, where intelligence is often subjugated to credentials, image, and the ability to fit in. In many cases, the smartest person in the room may be overlooked in favor of someone who is better at navigating social dynamics or playing politics. The individual who thinks deeply about complex problems might be dismissed in favor of someone who can make quick, surface-level decisions that are easier to digest. This is where Schopenhauer's view on intelligence rings especially true. Society values what is easy, not what is difficult. It values the appearance of competence over the substance of true understanding. And yet, those who have the courage to be themselves, to question the accepted narratives, often find themselves on the periphery. This is the irony of Schopenhauer's argument. The very qualities that make intelligent people capable of change, of seeing the deeper layers of the world, are the qualities that make them vulnerable to being pushed aside, ignored, or ostracized. It's a deeply unsettling truth. The very society that benefits from intelligence often works hardest to suppress it. This brings us to another key aspect of Schopenhauer's warning: the difficulty of living with true intelligence in a world that fears it. For Schopenhauer, intelligence wasn't simply about having knowledge. It was about seeing things as they are, unclouded by illusions or comforting myths. The truly intelligent person isn't swayed by popular opinion, doesn't rely on superficial comforts, and isn't afraid to see the world as it really is, warts and all. But this kind of awareness can be isolating. In a society that values collective beliefs, the individual who sees things differently can easily become a misfit, alienated from the rest. This alienation isn't just emotional. It can also be existential. Schopenhauer believed that the more intelligent a person was, the more likely they were to see life as meaningless. The pursuit of knowledge and the discovery of the world's deepest truths can, in Schopenhauer's view, lead to a profound existential crisis. When you realize that most of the world is content to live in ignorance, that they avoid uncomfortable truths at all costs, it can leave you feeling disconnected and lost. Schopenhauer himself grappled with this reality. He often spoke of the curse of intellectual clarity. To understand the world deeply is to become aware of its suffering, its contradictions, and its inevitable decay. The intelligent mind is burdened with this knowledge. The more you see, the more you understand, the harder it becomes to find meaning in the conventional pursuits of happiness and success. What is the point of fame, wealth, or status if they are fleeting and built on shallow foundations? Schopenhauer's pessimism about human existence was born from his belief that, no matter how much knowledge or wisdom one gains, the fundamental nature of life is suffering and impermanence. This dark truth, however, is not something most people are willing to confront, and thus, the intelligent individual is left to wrestle with it alone. This, again, is why Schopenhauer's philosophy holds such relevance today. In a world that increasingly values surface-level success and instant gratification, the truly intelligent mind must navigate a landscape that is often indifferent to the deeper questions. And as this tension between intellect and society grows, it becomes harder for those with true insight to find peace. They must either compromise their values to fit in or accept the loneliness and isolation that often come with intellectual depth. This struggle, Schopenhauer warned, is not just personal, it's cultural. A society that suppresses its most intelligent individuals will ultimately pay the price. The wisdom and critical thinking that these individuals possess are necessary for progress, for the betterment of humanity. If society continues to ostracize them, it risks stunting its own development, remaining forever caught in shallow thinking and ignorance. Schopenhauer's caution is clear: without the intelligent, without those who dare to see the world as it truly is, society stagnates, and ultimately, everyone suffers. The consequences of suppressing intelligence are not merely philosophical. They manifest in real-world crises. When a society disregards its intellectuals or stifles critical thought, it jeopardizes its capacity to innovate and address its most pressing issues. In today's world, this is glaringly apparent. From climate change denial to the spread of misinformation, the rejection of intellectual rigor in favor of convenience or conformity has led to disastrous outcomes. Schopenhauer's warning was not only a critique of human nature but also a caution about the future. If we ignore the importance of true intelligence, we risk undermining our very survival. One area where this becomes painfully evident is in the realm of scientific progress. We live in an age where vast amounts of information are at our fingertips, and yet, the value of careful, nuanced thinking seems to be diminishing. Research is increasingly being driven by funding agendas or political interests, and the pursuit of truth often takes a back seat to corporate profits or short-term gains. The scientific method, once revered as the gold standard for discovering the truth, is now being undermined by fake news, pseudoscience, and the increasing polarization of important issues. Schopenhauer's perspective on this is bleak but accurate. He warned that the overabundance of information can make it more difficult, not easier, to discern the truth. As more voices flood the public discourse, it becomes harder to separate fact from fiction. People are bombarded with so much noise that they stop listening to the few who are actually speaking with knowledge and insight. In Schopenhauer's time, this would have been a critique of philosophers and intellectuals who were ignored or dismissed. Today, however, it applies to scientists, journalists, and academics who, despite their expertise, are often marginalized or disregarded in favor of more sensational narratives. This kind of intellectual erosion doesn't just affect our understanding of complex issues, it affects our values as well. When we prioritize convenience and entertainment over thoughtful engagement with reality, we begin to lose sight of what is truly important. The intellectuals and thinkers who dare to question the prevailing norms are cast aside, while those who promote easy answers or flashy solutions are elevated to positions of influence. The result is a society that becomes increasingly shallow, focused more on immediate gratification than on long-term, meaningful change. Schopenhauer also cautioned that the pursuit of intellectualism often brings with it a deep sense of dissatisfaction. Those who dare to engage with life's darker truths, the ones who question, analyze, and scrutinize, are often left with a sense of despair. This isn't merely a passing feeling. It's the result of recognizing the limitations of human existence. The world, Schopenhauer believed, is fundamentally imperfect, and the more you understand it, the more apparent its flaws become. This is a difficult reality to accept, especially when society encourages us to ignore it and focus only on what is pleasant and uplifting. And yet, Schopenhauer believed that this very dissatisfaction could be a source of strength. For those who refuse to settle for the comfortable illusions that others rely on, intellectual engagement with the world can become a form of liberation. By embracing the harsh truths, by accepting that life is not always fair or easy, the individual frees themselves from the constraints of social expectations. They are no longer bound by the superficial standards of success or happiness. In Schopenhauer's view, true intellectual freedom lies in the acceptance of life's inherent suffering and the refusal to be deceived by comforting lies. But in the modern world, we find ourselves in an environment where these truths are increasingly difficult to access. With social media and other platforms amplifying voices that thrive on emotion and spectacle, it's easy for the deeper, more nuanced conversations to be drowned out. When intelligent discourse is reduced to sound bites and hashtags, the opportunity for true reflection and critical thinking is lost. The marketplace of ideas is flooded with shallow rhetoric, and the intellectuals who dare to challenge the narrative are pushed to the margins. This dynamic, according to Schopenhauer, is not just damaging to the individual, it's damaging to society as a whole. Societies that fail to nurture and protect their intellectuals, their deep thinkers, and their truth seekers are bound to repeat their mistakes. History has shown us time and again that the most innovative and transformative periods in human civilization came about through intellectual revolutions. Movements that challenged the prevailing paradigms and pushed humanity to think differently. Without the freedom to question, to think critically, and to engage with difficult truths, societies become stagnant and unremarkable. In this light, Schopenhauer's warnings about intelligence take on a new significance. They aren't just philosophical musings, they are urgent calls for action. To avoid the pitfalls of ignorance and intellectual suppression, we must create spaces where intelligent, critical thought is encouraged, not punished. We must learn to appreciate the discomfort that comes with confronting difficult truths and embrace the intellectual growth that comes from engaging with them. Only then can we begin to address the pressing challenges of our time and build a future that values intelligence in its truest, most transformative form. Schopenhauer's dark truth is this: intelligence, when left unchallenged and unprotected, will be silenced by the weight of societal norms and the allure of convenience. The more society suppresses its most intelligent thinkers, the more it compromises its own future. In a world that often feels driven by surface-level success and superficial pleasures, the need for intellectual engagement has never been more critical. As we explore Schopenhauer's ideas further, it becomes clear that the relationship between intelligence and society is not a simple one. In fact, it is often fraught with tension. Schopenhauer believed that while true intelligence is a rare and valuable gift, it is also a burden. Those who possess it are often out of step with the majority of people, who prefer comfort, simplicity, and consensus. The intellectual, in Schopenhauer's eyes, is frequently an outsider, someone who sees the world not as it is commonly understood, but through a lens that reveals its harsh realities. This alienation is, according to him, an inevitable consequence of thinking deeply. The struggle of the intellectual is one of isolation. The more a person understands the complexities and contradictions of life, the more distanced they become from the crowd. This isn't just a feeling, it's a social reality. People who question conventional wisdom, who seek deeper meaning, or who engage with uncomfortable truths are often viewed with suspicion or disdain. Schopenhauer's critique of society was based on the idea that the masses, in their pursuit of comfort and entertainment, tend to reject or marginalize those who challenge the status quo. This is particularly true in a world where intellectualism is often associated with elitism or pretension. In the modern age, this alienation is even more pronounced. With the rise of social media and the increasing speed at which information circulates, it has become harder for deep, meaningful conversations to take root. The age of soundbites and viral content rewards simplicity and consensus over complexity and dissent. In this environment, the intellectual is often rendered irrelevant, their insights drowned out by the noise of more superficial, easy-to-digest content. The intellectual's world is one of constant friction, torn between the desire to understand and the overwhelming pressure to conform. Schopenhauer also pointed out that intellectuals are often trapped by their own minds. The very capacity for critical thinking that allows them to understand the world more deeply also makes them more vulnerable to existential despair. For those who see the world in all its complexity, the harshness of reality can feel overwhelming. Schopenhauer himself struggled with this. He was deeply aware of the suffering inherent in the human condition, and his philosophy was shaped by this awareness. He warned that for those who truly understand the world, those who possess genuine intelligence, their awareness of suffering can be all-consuming. This is where Schopenhauer's concept of will comes into play. He believed that human beings are driven by a fundamental, insatiable force, the will to live. This will manifests in the desire for power, success, and personal fulfillment. However, for the intellectual, Schopenhauer argued, this will is often at odds with the reality they perceive. While the masses may be driven by the will to achieve material success or social status, the intellectual is driven by a deeper, often more elusive search for truth. This dissonance creates a tension that is difficult to resolve. For the intellectual, the will to understand the world and the will to live a conventional life are often incompatible. This creates a profound sense of isolation. Moreover, Schopenhauer's view of intelligence wasn't simply about intellectual prowess. He believed that true intelligence was not just about acquiring knowledge. It was about the ability to see beyond the surface, to recognize the deeper truths that others might overlook. It was an intelligence that questioned assumptions, that sought to uncover the underlying causes of suffering, and that understood the limits of human existence. This type of intelligence, Schopenhauer argued, was inherently at odds with the more shallow, surface-level understanding that society often values. In a world where success is measured by visible accomplishments, wealth, or popularity, the intellectual's pursuit of truth can seem irrelevant, even inconvenient. Yet, Schopenhauer argued that it was precisely this type of intelligence, one that sees beyond the facade of society, that was most valuable. While the masses sought comfort, the intellectual sought understanding. While others pursued fleeting pleasures, the intellectual grappled with the complexities of existence. In Schopenhauer's view, this pursuit of truth, though painful and isolating, was the only path to true freedom. For the intellectual, the world was not a place to be conquered, but a puzzle to be solved. And in the pursuit of solving that puzzle, they gained something far more valuable than any material success: a deeper, more profound understanding of life itself. In the context of modern society, this conflict between the intellectual and the masses is particularly evident in the ways in which knowledge is treated. We live in a time when information is more accessible than ever before, yet the value placed on intellectualism is, paradoxically, in decline. Knowledge is often reduced to a commodity, something to be consumed quickly and discarded just as easily. Complex ideas are often simplified, and nuance is lost in the rush to make content more palatable. This creates a culture in which deep, reflective thinking is undervalued, and those who engage in it are marginalized. Schopenhauer's warning, then, becomes a call to action. We must protect and nurture those who seek to understand, even if their understanding brings discomfort or challenges our preconceived notions. The intellectual is not an enemy of society. They are its greatest asset. They are the ones who ask the difficult questions, who challenge the assumptions that hold society back, and who push humanity toward a deeper understanding of itself. But for this to happen, society must create space for intellectual engagement. It must embrace complexity and discomfort, and be willing to confront the harsh truths that the intellectual so often uncovers. Schopenhauer's critique of intelligence extends beyond its social and personal consequences. He also warns about the inherent dangers that come with the pursuit of knowledge, particularly when it is driven by ego or unchecked ambition. This is where Schopenhauer's philosophy intersects with the darker aspects of the human psyche. He believed that intellectual achievement, when pursued for the wrong reasons, could lead to a form of intellectual hubris, a dangerous pride that blinds people to the limitations of their own understanding. The pursuit of knowledge, in Schopenhauer's view, can easily transform into a quest for power. Knowledge becomes not a tool for self-improvement or understanding, but a means of gaining control over others. This shift in motivation is what Schopenhauer feared most. When intelligence is used as a weapon rather than a lens through which to view the world, it becomes corrupted. The intellectual no longer seeks truth, but rather validation and influence. This ego-driven approach to intelligence is what leads to the kind of intellectual arrogance that Schopenhauer warned about. This phenomenon is not confined to any specific era or context. In the modern world, we can see this dynamic playing out in various forms. In academia, politics, and even technology, individuals with great intelligence often use their knowledge to manipulate others, maintain power, or advance their personal agendas. The more knowledge one accumulates, the more one can control the narrative, influence public opinion, or shape policy. Schopenhauer's warning about the dangers of ego-driven intellect remains as relevant today as it was in his time. Moreover, Schopenhauer suggested that the very pursuit of intellectual greatness, when taken to extremes, can lead to an inner emptiness. Intellectual achievement, while celebrated, does not necessarily lead to happiness or fulfillment. This is something that many highly intelligent individuals have come to realize. Success in the intellectual world, whether it's in science, literature, or philosophy, often brings with it a sense of isolation. The more an individual focuses on knowledge and intellectual accomplishments, the further they can drift from the joys and connections that others find in simpler, more grounded aspects of life. This disconnection from the rest of humanity can lead to an existential crisis, particularly when the intellectual realizes that their understanding of the world has not brought them the fulfillment they anticipated. Schopenhauer believed that this intellectual isolation could, in many cases, contribute to depression and despair. When someone is consumed by the pursuit of truth, they can lose sight of the simpler pleasures and relationships that bring meaning to life. Intellectuals, in Schopenhauer's view, are often so absorbed in their inner worlds that they neglect the external world, which includes their connections with others. This disconnection becomes more pronounced when the intellectual's insights are not appreciated or understood by the wider public. Schopenhauer understood this dynamic well, as he himself was often criticized and dismissed by his contemporaries. For someone who has spent years contemplating the nature of existence, society's inability or unwillingness to engage with these ideas can feel like a profound rejection. This alienation is a recurring theme in Schopenhauer's philosophy. The intellectual's journey, while intellectually enriching, can be a lonely one. But Schopenhauer also saw a paradox at play. The very intelligence that isolates an individual can also be the source of their greatest strength. While intelligence might separate the intellectual from the masses, it is also the tool that allows them to grasp the deeper truths of existence. The same mind that feels alienated is the one that has the potential to unlock understanding that transcends the limitations of the ordinary world. For Schopenhauer, this paradox is what made intellectual life both a curse and a blessing. The emotional and existential costs of intelligence are high, yet Schopenhauer believed they were inevitable. If one chooses to engage with the world on a deeper level, one must accept that the path will be filled with hardship. The pursuit of intellectual greatness is not for those seeking comfort or validation. It is for those who are willing to confront the raw, often painful realities of existence. Schopenhauer's warning is a reminder that true intelligence is not merely a gift, it is a responsibility. It comes with a price that many are unwilling to pay. This price, however, is not purely negative. Schopenhauer also argued that those who embrace the isolation and struggles of intellectual life are capable of finding deeper satisfaction in their lives. For those who can accept the inherent difficulties, intellectual pursuits offer a sense of purpose and clarity that cannot be found in the shallow distractions of the world. Schopenhauer's own life was a testament to this duality. Despite his personal struggles, his work has influenced generations of thinkers, offering insights into the nature of suffering, existence, and the human condition. Ultimately, Schopenhauer's warning is not to discourage the pursuit of knowledge, but to recognize the burdens that come with it. True intelligence is not about amassing information for the sake of recognition or influence. It is about understanding the world in all its complexity, accepting the suffering that comes with that understanding, and finding meaning in that knowledge. The price of this understanding is high, but the rewards, though not always material or immediately gratifying, can offer a profound sense of freedom and insight. In the final analysis, Schopenhauer's warning about intelligence is not one of pessimism but of realism. He recognized the profound impact that intelligence can have on an individual's life, both positive and negative. His perspective on intellect was not just about the potential for social manipulation or the isolation it could cause. It was about the deeper, existential questions that come with true understanding. He believed that the pursuit of intelligence, when approached honestly, could lead to a more authentic life, but only at the cost of accepting the harsh truths of existence. Schopenhauer's reflections challenge us to rethink how we view intelligence in today's world. In our era, intelligence is often seen as the key to success, whether in academia, business, or social influence. We live in a society that worships the idea of intellectual and technological progress, where intelligence is equated with power. Yet, Schopenhauer's philosophy forces us to question the true value of this pursuit. Is it really worth sacrificing emotional well-being, personal connections, and a balanced life in exchange for intellectual dominance? This is where Schopenhauer's teachings can offer a crucial lesson for contemporary society. As we advance technologically and intellectually, we must also be wary of the dangers that come with an unchecked focus on intelligence. Schopenhauer's warning about the potential dehumanization of the intellect resonates deeply today. In an era of artificial intelligence, data manipulation, and hypercompetition, the intellectual pursuits of many can easily lose sight of the human aspect. the ability to connect, empathize, and find meaning beyond the realm of reason and logic. At the same time, Schopenhauer's thoughts serve as a call to those who may feel alienated or disconnected by their own intellectual pursuits. For anyone who has ever felt like an outsider because of their deep thinking or academic achievements, Schopenhauer's philosophy offers validation. Yes, the life of an intellectual can be lonely, but it is also filled with opportunities for deep self-reflection and personal growth. Those who embrace the intellectual path must learn to balance their pursuit of knowledge with the wisdom of humility, empathy, and self-awareness. In a way, Schopenhauer's philosophy offers a balance, a warning against the blind pursuit of intelligence and a reminder that it is only valuable when used in service to a greater understanding of the human experience. It urges individuals to not just accumulate facts and data, but to reflect on the deeper implications of what they know. The true power of intelligence, Schopenhauer believed, lies not in how much we can accumulate, but in how we use that knowledge to live a more authentic, compassionate, and meaningful life. Schopenhauer's warning, in the end, is not just for the intellectual elite but for all of us. It challenges us to consider how our own pursuit of intelligence and knowledge impacts our relationships, our society, and our inner well-being. The message is clear: intelligence in its purest form should not be a means to an end but a lifelong journey, one that requires constant self-examination, humility, and an understanding of our own limitations. The true darkness of intelligence, according to Schopenhauer, lies not in the knowledge itself but in how we choose to wield it. It is a tool that can both enlighten and blind, elevate and isolate. By embracing his warning and examining the ways in which we use our intelligence, we can navigate the complexities of the human condition with a deeper sense of awareness and responsibility. The pursuit of knowledge, while fraught with risks, can lead to true wisdom if we approach it with the right mindset. A mindset that balances intellect with emotional depth, reason with empathy, and ambition with humility. Schopenhauer's timeless reflections remind us that intelligence is not a simple path to success or power. It is a journey fraught with existential challenges, but also with profound opportunities for growth, understanding, and transformation. It is, ultimately, up to us how we navigate this journey and whether we allow our intellect to illuminate the deeper truths of our existence or let it imprison us in a world of isolation, ego, and despair.